back to my channel. Happy Sunday. So this week we are going to be doing a DIY that is a DIY wind chime. So this one is a really fun one. It's with things that you probably already have around your house, and it's going to create a really pretty result. You could use it as a wind chime outside, on your porch, or even in like a sunroom, or even just hanging in a window would be super pretty. So for this DIY, what you're going to need is either some lids of yogurt containers, like big yogurt containers, or something like this, like a salad container or any kind of plastic that you could cut to the shape that you want. So I'm going to be doing mine in a circle, so I'll use the base of the salad container and some yogurt tops, but whatever shape you want to do or whatever plastic you have available totally works. And you will want, for however many panels of wind chime you're going to do, you're going to want 2 for each panel. So 2 salad containers are going to make 1 panel of wind chime because you have 2 bottoms. So you'll see as we go along it'll make a little bit more sense. But just keep that in mind. If you want 3 panels, you're going to need 6 pieces of plastic. You're also going to need our trusty Mod Podge. You know that I love to use this in a lot of my DIYs, so we're going to use some of that today. You'll need a hot glue gun, and then you'll need some of these little jewelry rings or something like that that you can use to kind of loop through to connect the pieces of our wind chime. And then for my wind chime element, I'm going to be using some bells. So I got these kind of rustic looking bells off of Amazon. I'll link them for you guys along with everything else, but this comes in a pack of 10 and we're only going to use a couple of them, so I figured that we could use some of these for future projects for Christmas. Also, they have really pretty sound, so I think that'll be really nice. And then you will also need some kind of twine or rope or something like that to connect your pieces of your wind chime together. And if you're going to be following along with the style of wind chime that I'm making, then I'm going to be putting some pressed flowers in mine. I love the look of pressed flowers and things. I think it's really pretty and bright and kind of brings some nature into your house. And I love it all year long, so we're going to use some of those in our wind chime. And then on the edges of our wind chime, I'm going to be making mine gold. So I'm going to use some faux gold foil for that, but you could use paint, you could leave them plain, you could do any color that you wanted for that. Some alternatives for your wind chime if you don't want to do the pressed flower look. You could do like a stained glass look and you could paint the inside and kind of press the paint together. You could do photographs inside. I think that would be really cool. And I also think that tearing up some pieces of tissue paper from gift bags would be really nice and pressing it in there for kind of like a mosaic look. But there's a million different things that you could do. That's just a couple ideas. So if you want to follow along with how to make the wind chime and go a different route with what you put inside, you could totally do that. If you want to go with what I'm doing, then we will do the pressed flower route. So these ones are ones that I got pre-pressed. I also have some that I'm using that I pressed myself, so either works. All right, so we're gonna get right into it. This is a really fun DIY. It should be a pretty inexpensive one. Honestly, I already had almost all of this stuff. I think the only thing I had to buy was the bells and the jewelry rings. Everything else I already had. And that's honestly totally fine because we will use these again in the future, so they're not going to go to waste. Hopefully you have a lot of these materials so that this is a super budget-friendly DIY for everyone. And let's get right into it. Good girl. Okay, so I have my hot glue gun warming up. I have one of these like super intense Gorilla Glue guns, so I put it on the low setting. I would probably recommend putting yours on low too, just because we're working with plastic, so we don't want to melt it if it's too super hot. You also don't want to burn yourself too badly. I've definitely done that before. And then I went ahead and grabbed a handful of clothespins. These I just have in my kitchen, and they're going to be helpful when we're making our panels to our wind chime to clip them together while we glue them. Set those over there, and we are going to start by cutting out our plastic pieces. So make sure that they match up. These look a little bit different, so I don't know if I have two different kinds of salad container, but these ones match, so I'll do these two together. And I also, before, went ahead and took all the labels off with some Goo Gone so that there's no residue on there and they're a totally clean surface. So you're going to take one of these, and I want mine to be circle shaped, but you can do any shape you want. You could do square, you could do oval, diamond. I did a little crescent moon for one. So whatever you want to do totally works. Just make sure that your two panels match up. Let's cut this into a little circle. And don't worry too much about your edges if they're like not super even or have any like little jagged bits, because when we hot glue the edges, it's going to cover it up anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. This is a very forgiving DIY because the edges are going to be covered in hot glue, and then the hot glue is going to be either painted, or if you're doing it like me, we're going to put gold foil on it. So everything is going to be disguised by something else. So if you make any mistakes along the way, it's not a super big deal because we can fix it later. So I got mine roughly out. I still have on the edge right here kind of a turned down bit from where the container was curving. So I am going to touch that up a little bit just because I want them to sit really flat together and not have any space for the flowers to move around once I glue it shut. That way everything stays where I put it over time. And then I'm going to cut this one out to match the same shape and size of the other one. So for me, because I'm using salad containers, and these ones over here I did later on with yogurt tops, they're already kind of pre-measured for you because there's a lip to both of them or a curve to the container. So it shows me where, you know, the guide is to kind of make sure they're the same size. If you don't have that and you're using a flat piece of plastic or something like that, then I would suggest setting this down and tracing it so that you don't have two different sizes that you have to fix later. Okay, so now I have two sides of my panel cut out and ready to go, and they're going to fit perfectly into each other, even with the salad container shape on the bottom where it kind of has like a little indent and some ridges. It works out great because if I face them opposite sides together, then they kind of rest into each other and make a perfect seal. So we'll go ahead and we'll cut out the other two, and then we'll be ready to start placing our flowers and gluing. Okay, so looking at the colors that I've done in my other wind chimes, which these are all ones that I pressed myself, so they're not perfectly flat, but they're pretty good, and they, you know, work out perfectly fine inside of our panels. So I've got kind of a ground rose, I've got some whites and yellows, pink or pinky reds and yellows, and then these little white ones as well. So it seems like I'm kind of going with yellows, pinks, and whites. So let's go ahead. I think that we will use these two that I haven't opened yet. So whether you do pressed flowers you have pressed, or if you want to get these ones off of Amazon, both work perfectly fine. I got this pack on Amazon just recently. I've been using flowers that I pressed myself, but I just wanted some flatter ones for the last DIY that we did. That was the taper candlesticks with the flowers on it. So now I have some left over, so I might as well use them. But this came in a pack of 4 with 4 different colors, and I think it was about like $11 for 100 of them, so it wasn't too bad, I think. So if you don't want to bother with pressing them yourself, this is a great way to go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll open up our 2 plastic pieces that go together that are the same size and set them on our table. And you're going to put all of your flowers that you want to use into one side of the plastic, so just on one plastic piece. You don't want to put them on both pieces because then when you go to sandwich it together, they're going to fall and move out. Remember too that you kind of want all of your flowers to face the same direction, if that makes sense. So all the sides that you consider to be the front of your flower facing the same way and all the backs facing the same way, so that when it turns, you're getting either the front or the back of the image that you're creating. Okay, and then once you have all the ones you want, make sure that they're positioned how you like them and you don't want to adjust anything. And when it all looks good, which I think mine does, then you are going to place your two pieces together. So set the extras off to the side until we do our next one, and we are going to glue this one together. So at this point, I'm going to clip the edges so that things don't move around on me. So I like to do it four corners like this. I just think that it works the best, and you can glue in between and then pick it up and add glue so that you can kind of just rotate around. So we're going to glue the edges, and I suggest doing a light layer at first and then going back and touching up on the sides so that you get all of the edges. And then once it's all glued, we'll let it dry, and this one will be good to go. I glued these three edges and I left this one open where my fingers are, and then I'm going to let these dry for a second, and then I'll take off some of the clothespins, just these two for now, and touch up in between where the clothespins were, and then once that dries we can rotate and do this side, and then we'll be good to go. And this is just kind of the method that I'm using so that I can make sure that my fingers are protected, that I'm not going to accidentally touch hot glue or burn myself, and we get all the edges sealed up without any gapping for the flowers to move. So I can already tell, you can see the color changing on the glue, and it's getting a little bit more like opaque and white, so it's almost dry. If it's not super even, like if your glue looks a little bit lumpy, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I wouldn't really worry about it, because I think when we paint it or put the gold foil on it, it's going to make it look more purposeful, so it won't really matter if it looks a little bit lumpy right now like mine does. Not too worried. So we'll let this little bit dry, and then we'll finish off the last little edge, and this one will be good to go, and we can do our second one. So the next step in our process is going to be adding either the paint or the gold foil to the edge of each of our wind chime pieces. So I'm going to be doing the faux gold foil. So for that I'm going to need some of the faux gold sheets and a little bit of Mod Podge and a brush. To start off, I'm just going to pull a little bit off of one of my sheets here to get it ready to go and set it off to the side. So I'm going to dip my brush into the Mod Podge and make sure that it has some on the brush, but it's not like dripping coated. It's just coated enough that you can brush some on. We don't want it to run. We just want it to sit where we place it. So we're going to paint the Mod Podge over the hot glue that we have on the edges. And I would just start by doing a little bit at a time, and then placing your gold sheet on here like that. You can tear off any extra that you have and set it off to the side, and then we're just gonna tap it on like this. And this is the best way that I've found to do it if you want like a really opaque solid gold kind of look. If you want it to be just pieces of gold and you want some of that clear hot glue to shine through, then you could kind of place it and peel it off as you go so that only parts of it stay. But I want it to be completely covered. So I'll add glue and some foil as I go and tap it. And you can kind of maneuver it, like if you see back here, it's sticking up, right? So I can kind of tap it and fold it onto itself to make it so that it's a thicker layer. And that way it doesn't tear as easily, and you make sure that it's totally covered. So right now it's gonna look kind of coated in the Mod Podge and not very shiny. And that's what you want, because you want it to kind of make like a paper mache effect with the foil so that it doesn't peel off later on. So you want to get a nice layer of the Mod Podge over it like that. And then when that dries, it'll dry clear and you'll see that shiny gold foil come through. All right, so we're going to continue just like that, doing the same thing all the way around. And then for all of our other wind chime pieces as well. And when they're all completely covered, we'll set them off to the side to dry for a little bit. Now that we have all of our gold foil onto the edges for all of our pieces, the next thing that we're gonna do is add our little jewelry rings. So these look like this. They're little gold rings. They come in silver as well. I just picked gold to go with what we already had. And the ones that I got have a bunch of different sizes inside of here. So I'm gonna pick the biggest size. We're gonna attach them to the top and the bottom of each of our wind chime panels. And we're gonna do that using some hot glue. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But this is going to be how we string our wind chime together. So once these are attached and dried, we're going to be putting our twine through them to make the chain of the wind chime. So obviously you can do this in any shape that you want to do. I'm going to make mine as just a straight long wind chime. The first thing we want to do while our glue gun is heating up is we want to look at all of our panels and find the front of the panel and the top of the panel. So for each piece, decide what you think is going to be the front so that they're all facing up the same way. For one like this, so we have this side and we have this side. To me, this is clearly the back. You can see all of the backs of the flowers. So I would want this side to be facing forward. And of course your wind chime is going to spin and move as the wind comes, but I'm doing this just because I want all of the fronts of my panels to be on the same side together and all the backs on the same side together. I don't want them mixed and matched, and that's just my personal preference of the look that I like. Then what you're going to do is you're going to start gluing a ring to the top and the bottom of each panel and try to get it as straight as you can so that your wind chime isn't hanging crooked. If it is a little bit off, it's not that big of a deal. It's just going to be a little bit tilted and, you know, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so once you have your top and your bottom, you're going to set this off to the side, and then we're going to do the same for all of the others. So now we have all of our rings on, and it is time to start threading our wind chime. So I have this big ball of like twine. I'm not sure exactly what this is called. I'll find something similar or find this exact one in my Amazon and link it for you guys. I got this a really long time ago, and it has like a massive amount of twine on it, so it lasts forever. Okay, so you're going to determine how you want it situated. I know that I want my crescent to be in the middle, so I'm thinking that I will do this one, then this one, then my crescent, then this one, and this one at the bottom, and then underneath we'll attach our bells to the very bottom. Once you have your order figured out, you're going to start threading and cutting some of your twine. So this part is a little bit tricky because we do have to fit the twine through this little tiny hole. So I'm going to make a fresh cut on the end of my rope, try to make it easier on myself. Yeah, so that is much easier. And then once you have that, you can cut the length that you want. This is what it's going to be hanging from onto whatever hook or whatever it is that you have to hang your wind chime on. So I'll cut it a little bit longer, and then we can always trim it if we want. Okay, so now that we have our jewelry rings put on each side of each of our wind chime panels, we are going to connect them with our twine. So we have our first one done. This is our top piece, and so we did just a little loop and pulled it through, and that's how we're going to hang it. And then for our remaining wind chime pieces, we're going to do just simple regular knots. If you know a better knot to do, then you can go ahead and do that here. But for me, I do not know very many knots, so we're just going to do a simple regular knot, and we're going to put a little dot of hot glue to hold it on, make sure it's extra secure, and then we'll be good to go. Alright, so we're going to cut a piece of our twine and make sure that our front pieces are facing the same direction. So these are both my fronts, so I'm going to have them both facing this way. And then we're going to thread it through like that, set it down, thread it through our other ring, and then tie a knot whatever length you want it to be in between your two wind chime panels. So I'm going to give it a little bit of space so that you can see some of the twine. It's looking like this, and obviously this is a lot of excess that we don't want. So I'm going to cut the excess off, and where I cut it off is where I'm going to put my two little dots of hot glue to make sure that these ends don't slip through the knot at any point when they're being blown around by the wind. So I'm going to add the hot glue at the very end once I have all of my rope pieces so that I can just do it in one go. And I'm going to continue to add my rope pieces just like that one. And here is our finished product. So mine is quite long. You can make yours shorter or longer, or have it go out to the sides, whatever you prefer. But this is what it looks like, and hopefully you can kind of see with some of the light coming through that it really makes the gold and the flowers like pop and draw your eye to them. And then we have our two bells at the bottom, which when the wind comes, make a really, really pretty sound. So we are going to put this out on the front porch, and then I'll show you what it looks like out there. Well, that wraps up our video for this week. I hope that you enjoyed making the wind chime and that it turned out really beautifully. Please let me know how yours turned out and where you can hang it. And if you did a different style than I did and you put something different inside, I would love to know what you did. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. I put new videos out every Sunday. I do lots of DIYs and thrift flips and sometimes home renovations. So if you liked today's video and you're interested in doing more DIYs in the future with me, then I will see you next week.